Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about how we can see our own emotional expressions. We can actually see our own emotional expressions, which is a strange thing that most of us don't realize that we can do. And at the end I'll talk about how masks potentially mess this up, and there's a whole story that goes along with this. But let me first of all back up and just point out the degree to which visual feedback is crucial to all the things that we do. As we move through the world, you have optic flow. That's just the things in the world that are moving, outwardly flowing in your visual field, and that provides tremendous cues that allow you to modulate, how you're moving as you go forward. Of course, you can see your hands, which allows you to have the visual feedback to do cool motor stuff with them, and the very position of your eyes relative to your muzzle, animals' muzzles, is such that you get the right side view of your muzzle and the left side view of your muzzle. So you get this sort of God's eye, both sides view, and yet it doesn't occlude anything out in the world. So you get this great view, but whatever the right eye misses that the muzzle's blocking of the world, well, the left eye sees that, and you can stitch them together, have this you can perceive your muzzle as this semi-transparent thing, and you can actually see your nose is in your visual field right now. It's semi-transparent, you get this great view, and you're not affected by the world, but you need visual feedback to do smart behavior. It's crucial. The only counterexample to doing smart behavior, motor behavior, is your tongue. It's really one of the few things that you really do in a smart way. There's even walking, you see it in your lower visual field. Your tongue is the only thing that you can't see, and it does remarkable motor behavior, but it's sort of a counterexample that proves the rule, because your tongue is doing all these fancy acrobatic stuff and manipulating the position of food in your mouth, but it's kind of sitting inside a casing of gums and top, the roof of your mouth and so forth, where it sort of has skin that can sense where it is. So it's sort of in this world where it has all of these senses. So proprioception is not enough, except for the tongue, because it's surrounded by this space of stuff. Just being able to feel where your arm is and feel where your body is never gives you the kinds of feedback and precision that you need compared to what vision can give you. Now, getting to emotional expressions, and Dr. Tim Barber in my book that's coming out in a few months, Express the Human on the Origins of Emotional Expressions. And one thing that we don't talk about in the book, which is a very interesting thing that I've talked about in an earlier book, Human 3.0, is if visual motor feedback is so important, if seeing what you're doing is so important so that we can do these acrobatic behaviors, well, another kind of behavior that we do isn't really motor behavior per se, but emotional behaviors. It's doing the emotional facial expressions on your face. And that's a key thing that we do. It's just as important as the motor behaviors in moving through the world, because we need to emotionally express just right, titrate it just so that we can manipulate the minds and wills of all of us around us. And that's the real habitat that matters. So how do we possibly finally titrate our emotional expressions to all those around us without seeing our own emotional expressions? Now you say, well, that sounds silly. Why would we need to see ourselves? Well, first of all, right now, I'm seeing myself. I have this camera on selfie mode. If I didn't have it on selfie mode, or I just put it on like normal take a photo kind of mode and turn it around, I'd have no idea whether I'm centered. I would probably be like this the whole time and not know, or I'd be off to here. It'd be really hard. You need to see, I can see myself. I can see that I'm positioned appropriately. So I get this constant feedback about my position so that I'm presenting or signaling or communicating to you correctly. Now, this doesn't concern emotional expressions per se, and you do the same thing whenever you're on a FaceTime call or on a Zoom call. You have the little image of yourself so that you can be making sure that your communication, your signaling, your what you're presenting to the other is as you want it to be. So it's still, and that's not really motor behavior, that's just making sure that your signals are going in the right way. Now, I claim that we do this, and we evolved to do this, even with our faces, to be able to see our own emotional expressions so that we can titrate it. So how do we make emotional expressions on our faces? Well, we have musculature that goes up and down here. When you smile, these things go up and down, and your lips, change, and all these things are actually visible in your visual field. The eyebrows go up and down, they change. All of these surrounding parts of your face are actually visible in your visual field. And as we've talked about before, we've talked about these things in terms of what masks block, and that when you put charcoal here, the athletes that do this, the reason they're doing that is because light shines on that spot and reflects into the eye. And that's because your cheeks and even your lips and your nose and your nostrils and even your eyebrows are in your far peripheral field. You're not consciously aware of them, but they're there. They determine the ends of your visual field. So as they modulate, your visual field is getting a little bit wider in these various spots, and it's changing. So the structure of your visual field itself changes. And every time you do an emotional expression, it's exactly the kind of thing that's changing these kinds of borders, because all of these different things are happening here, here, and your nostrils and your nose, and even your lips are actually visible in the very, so the boundaries of your visual field are changing as a function of your emotional expressions, giving you the feedback that you need. But it's actually more than that. So let me give you an example. It's still not the same as actually looking at your own face. Imagining everywhere you go, you have a camera focus at your own face so that you could see your own face and make sure that it's expressing what you want it to express to the other person. Maybe sometimes you're matching the other person. The other person smiles, and you want to smile, and not just smile, but smile to the same quantitative precision that they are, because you don't want to be like over smiling or under smiling. All of these things, or maybe, if they're angry, you want to say, oh no, actually, never mind, I'm trying to calm you down, and I do some other expression to calm you down, but I need to titrate it to whatever you're doing. And so I need to see both of ours, and I need to be able to see what my face really looks like, not just have some kind of abstract changes. So let me give you an example where we do have this kind of sense of what we really sound like, just like others do. And that's the intonation of our voice, the prosody, the kinds of emotional, the emotional expressiveness that we do through the sounds of our voice. We hear pretty much like they do. I mean, there are some differences, but most of it is something that the way that I hear it is isomorphic to the way that you hear it. So when you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, I might try to mimic that. And I can then get my intonation in the emotional expressiveness of my auditory channel to kind of match yours. So it turns out that the way that we actually see our own face has some similarities to the way it is, at least in an isomorphic sense. And let me show you this for a second. So for example, our visual field, we're binocular. Binocular means we have two eyes. And so for example, this is what your right eye can see. Your right eye sees this whole visual field on the right half. And over here, though, is your nose. And so this is the part, if you were to close your left eye, then your nose is poking into your visual field, your muzzle, and maybe all of this part is sort of the ridges of your nose. And so this whole region is what your right eye sees. And then this whole dotted region is what your left eye sees. And that's where the nose is bumping into the visual field and blocking part of the visual field for the other eye. And so the top here, is where the brow is. Down here is where the mouth and cheeks are. And then, of course, you've got the nose. So you have not just, your visual field is not just a single big oval. It actually has structure to it. It has these two different parts, and with these blockages where one sort of ends, and then there's the overlap region as well. And in fact, you could kind of draw it for fun like this. We have sort of this one monocular region for the right eye and another monocular region. I've just put fake eyeballs in them. And at the bottom, we have sort of cheeks and mouth, and then the brows on top. And this whole inner region is sort of the region between the nostrils that block each parts of these visual field. And so as you smile, well, what happens when you smile? You get cheeks, for example, actually go up to that's what it looks like to the other person, but it actually changes the shape of your own visual field in a manner that's isomorphic to what the other person is seeing. If you go like this because you're surprised, well, your visual field goes up here, which means that even from your own, this is your view out of your face. This is what your view looks like. The extremities and the shape of your visual field as you look out. It has these two regions, this one region over here, another region over here, and it's really sort of qualitatively three different regions, the overlap region and the two monocular regions in the top and bottom. When you become surprised, it goes up. So you end up with an isomorphic perception. Again, these are far extreme parts of your visual field, so you're not perceiving in the normal sense, but you're getting visual feedback from your own visual field that changes as a function of you changing your emotional expressions in a way that's just like the way that other people's are when they're viewing you. So I can see, as I'm looking at them, I see, oh, they just got surprised. So maybe I'm going to get surprised too, to sort of be surprised with them. So I can raise mine, and I can see how much mine is raising, and it's actually looks like a face who's going up. So I have much better ability to match my emotional expressions to theirs, because just like for auditory, if they're whiny and I want to whine with them, I go, oh, okay. I'm being just as whiny as they are, and it's the same thing. It's not just like I'm having to change some parameters and hope that it sort of matches. No, it actually sounds the same. And so you end up with this isomorphic kind of face, this perception of your own emotional expressions of looking out. And so the face has been designed through evolution to be able to be positioned such that the parts of the face that change for emotional expressions are not only visible, but are visible in such a way that our view out of it gives us a kind of homunculus, a view of oneself, the emotional homunculus, that gives us a view of one's own emotional expressions in a way that's isomorphic to the way that other people see us. This is what I call the emotional homunculus, and I talk about it in my earlier book, Human 3.0. Now, so now in the context of masks, one thing that's missing when you wear masks, of course, when you're wearing masks, you're covering over your emotional expressions anyhow. So it's not as if I'm now handicapped at finally titrating my emotional expressions so that you can see them appropriately. But then again, if we're both wearing masks, I'm not seeing yours to even titrate anything of mine too. So in some sense, it doesn't matter. But what I think potentially might be missing here is that in normal life, part of why we feel alive is we're experiencing our emotional expressions. If I was doing a Zoom call with you and my little image of myself just froze, just froze into one spot, and I'm still doing all of these things, but I don't get feedback. My only feedback is just frozen. I'm feeling kind of depressed, or I don't have the vitality that I usually have. My own feedback of my own emotional vitality is gone, because with the mask here, I guess I can see my eyebrows, but a lot of the other stuff below, that's me getting a feeling for the emotional expressions that I'm doing, in vain, of course, with a mask. But nevertheless, I would see those things usually and feel like, here's the vital me that is, me and my existence, and feeling those emotional expressions. And that's part of what it is to feel alive, and we don't consciously appreciate any of this. But when it's taken away, you often have effects. You feel potentially different. You feel like a different person. You feel like this is not what it's like to be alive. To be alive normally is to have these other changes that I'm not consciously aware of, but I'm missing it now, and you don't know what it is. So that's just something that's subtle but crucial for the way that we interact in the real world. It's just as crucial as seeing things in the world so that we can have the visual motor feedback to act and behave in an amazingly acrobatic manner. But this concerns the emotional acrobatics that we do and our behaviors with others. And you need to see your own face in order to do that. That was your science moment.